Quick little heads up slash warning from me here because I forgot to mention it in the original recording of the video, but I do go into story and stuff on a lot of these games, so if you haven't played some of them or don't want to be spoiled or anything on the Metroid series in general, I probably don't watch this, but if you don't mind or you have played them all, by all means. Hello everyone, this is going to be a weird video today. I've never really done anything like this before, but I was like, that seems like a fun idea, and I like doing tier lists with like friends and stuff, so we're gonna do a tier list of the Metroid games now that I have played most of them. So I found this tier list. I did add AM2R to it because AM2R is what I played, and I'm probably going to either, you know what, let's just add another row. I don't know if I need that many rows for how many Metroid games there are, but I feel like I need a tier for I have never played this before, and we're going to change the color to like gray for never played, because there are a few on here that I've never played. Yeah, just a couple though. So alright, let's go ahead and get started, and I can kind of get some of my thoughts out about the series and stuff as well. So first is Metroid. Have played Metroid, have never beaten it because the original Metroid is weird. It's very weird. So where do we want to put Metroid? I feel like flawed but enjoyable is where it would go, because it's on the NES. For a NES game, I feel like it has some stuff, you know? And I remember playing it and enjoying it when I was a kid, but it is, I would say flawed but enjoyable can still be where the original Metroid is. Maybe major problems if I knew more about it, but I think for like the first like entry in the series where it was kind of finding its legs, flawed but enjoyable is fine, albeit I admittedly have less experience with that. Metroid 2. So, yeah, we haven't actually played, Metroid 2. I'm going to say... I mean, I guess the thing to say would be never played. You know, because I haven't actually played it. I was going to get into, like, story and stuff and what I think was interesting about that, but... meh. Super Metroid, I mean, come on. Super Metroid is fantastic. Really, my only gripe with Super Metroid is kind of the same gripe I have with a lot of the 2D games, which is I struggle with Shrine Spark puzzles. So, Super Metroid is really good though. Like, come on. It's kind of the crux of most of the timeline as well, which is something to keep in mind. Honestly, maybe this is crazy, but I do kind of feel like Super Metroid goes in peak fiction. It just has so many cool things in it, and story-wise, it's awesome as well. And the fact that, you know, it was on the SNES is kind of crazy for how complete it feels and everything. Like, just a fantastic game. Should I put it? No, I think I've got to put it here for reasons that I'll get into later. Super Metroid is fantastic, but it is very early, and I do think there are some things that get slightly higher than it for me. Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, So, yeah, we're gonna put that there. Metroid Prime, honestly, I think Prime is peak fiction. I love Prime. I love Prime so much. This does have the remakes on here, which most of the remakes are probably going to go in the same spot. Like, you know, Metroid Prime remake is going to... I'm not going to order them based off of which one I think is better or anything, because obviously I haven't... Well, I have played the original Prime on GameCube, but I don't think they differ enough to warrant them being put in separate spots. It's not like a Silent Hill remake trilogy thing, the awful remake series that was released on like the PS2 or something, or was it the 360? It's not like that story where it just totally ruins the game. Speaking of peak, Fusion. Do I put Fusion above Prime? I don't know. Like, Prime to me is like a... How do I explain this? Prime to me is like a good, just fantastic, well thought out meal. You know? Like it's got everything you want. It's healthy, you know? It doesn't like, I mean it does, but it doesn't like totally knock your socks off. It's just like a fantastic, well-structured meal, no notes. But Fusion, I love the atmosphere and story of Fusion so much. Like the SAX is so cool. And I've always loved the look of the suit in Fusion, and the fact that it's a Game Boy Advance one is just like, there's so much good in Fusion, I think. I really like Fusion. Possibly a wild take for some people, but the part of the reason I don't normally do stuff like this, or like tier lists or things, is because I purely base these things off of vibes. And admittedly, some of these games I haven't played for a bit, so like my memories of some of them are going to be worse than my memories of others, but like Fusion sticks out to me so much. I love Fusion. I just think it's so cool. And I remember it being pretty difficult at times as well, but yeah, Fusion to me is fantastic. I will order them in such a way in their tiers, like if there's multiple things in Peak Fiction, the stuff at the furthest to the left will be what I like the most in that tier, etc, etc. But yeah, this is probably going to be a list that's going to get me in trouble. But yeah, these are my opinions, and like I said, some of them I will remember less than others and stuff, so it's mostly the stuff that made the largest impact on me and stuck out to me the most is how we're going to handle this. So, next is Zero Mission. Zero Mission, Zero Mission, Zero Mission. I think Zero Mission is... Honestly, I don't really have any... I think it's a great game. I think it's fine. I think it's totally fine, you know? And I think it being above Metroid is very fair, so it's going to go on like the rightmost side of great games, but you know, I think it's good. Metroid Prime Pinball, haven't played it, want to play it. Unfortunately it's on the DS, so you know, figuring that out would be a little bit difficult, but I'm sure we could find some sort of fashion to play Metroid Prime Pinball. Or Nintendo can stop being cowards and like put it on an SO or something. Okay. Then we've got Echoes. So, I really like Echoes. I think Echoes is super cool. Like, Prime to me is kind of, you know, the start of all this, and, well, start of the Prime series at the very least, not the start of all this. It's the start of the Prime series, so it kind of gave Prime legs, I suppose, and kind of is the founding father, or something, you know? I don't know what to call it. But its story is also so interesting, Metroid Prime, just like the way it was made and how they were struggling and they didn't know how to particularly make that transition to 3D, but they absolutely nailed it. And to me, Echoes just kind of iterates on Prime in really interesting ways. So I really like Echoes. I think Echoes goes above Prime for me. Possibly sacrilege. I don't know how people feel about these things, and I'm scared, but I really like Echoes. I like the whole light and dark world thing. The light and dark beams are cool. The only real negative I have to say about Echoes is it has some potentially difficult bosses. So that's a thing. You know, it has some pain in there. But I think that's fine. I think difficulty's fine. But Echoes was just so cool. I had such a good time with Echoes. So that I think is also a Peak Fiction. I mean, if I was going to... I do think Prime is super good. Does Prime move down to great games? I don't know, though. Prime is just, like, I'm looking at it like, this is the problem with these things. I always get caught up on, like, the details and stuff. Like, I don't just judge these on, like, story and gameplay. It's also, like, oh, well, this one came out on the GBA, and, like, what ways did it really push forward the medium of GBA games? And I think Fusion is just a phenomenal game in so many ways, especially one for the GBA. And then Echoes did, like, a lot of really interesting stuff for the formula, and Prime was the start of it all, and they nailed the landing super, super hard, and it's just a fantastic experience. But does it reach the heights of Echoes or Fusion for me? Is the question. I think it does. I think it just needs to be on the right side of this. I think it does. I don't think I can put it in the same tier as Super Metroid and Zero Mission. Something else interesting with this is going to be how I'm going to actually compare the 2D versus 3D, because I think a big question at the end of the Metroid series is, do I prefer the 2D games or do I prefer the 3D games? And that's a really hard question to answer. This is Hunters. So Hunters, I think it's flawed but enjoyable. I think it's flawed but enjoyable. It misses a lot of the exploration and kind of really tries to focus on the PvP stuff. I think it has some interesting things, and it did give us Silex, which is cool. It did do that. It did indeed do that. It also gave us the other ones. It's also my first, like, real memorable experience with Metroid, so I do have a little bit of a, you know, nostalgia for that. But I think flawed but enjoyable is where Hunters can go. It does, it does have some pretty major problems, but I think it can still be enjoyable. I think it can still be enjoyable. Flawed but enjoyable. I don't really know if anything's gonna make it an absolutely terrible. Maybe Other M. We'll see. Alright, Corruption. I think that's another flawed but enjoyable. I do think it goes above Metroid and Hunters, though. I feel like my main thing with Corruption is I didn't really have a problem with anything in the game. Like, some of the exploration was slightly lowered, and some people don't like the inclusion of the other characters, but I didn't really mind that. I feel like the main problem for me with Corruption is just how OP, like, the, what was it? The hypercharge? Basically, like, the Corruption thing. The Phazon Beam? That would be it, right? That whole thing, I feel like, trivialized so many of the combat encounters. Where it became like, the solution is always use that. Whereas in other games like, you know, Beyond and, you know, Prime and in Prime 2, it's like, oh, which weapon should I use in this encounter? Let's try to dissect this encounter and see, like, what would be best here. Do I want to use super missiles? Do I want to use lightning? Do I want to use fire? Do I want to use ice missiles? Like, you have those decisions that you have to make in the middle of combat, and I like that. That, to me, is, like, one of the big things of Metroid, is, like, every single combat. It kind of reminds me of, like, fighting a boss, a big scary boss in a JRPG. You sit down, you open up your little bag of goodies, and you're like, okay, what is ideal for taking down this particular enemy? And I like that, and Corruption took some of that away by just being like, well, the solution most of the time is just to use your super overpowered, messed up on drugs Super Saiyan Samus state. So that's the reason it goes into flawed but enjoyable for me, and that's why it's also high on flawed but enjoyable, because I really enjoyed my time with Corruption, but it does have some flaws, I think. I think it does have some flaws. Which, like, you know, all of these have flaws, but I think that one is a pretty big one for me personally. It might not bother other people as much, but I do just like the kind of sitting down and prepping for a fight and trying to come up with a solution to the encounter so much. It's one of my favorite parts about, like, The Witcher 1 and Witcher 2 specifically, and why I wasn't as into The Witcher 3, because in those games, like, before you go into a fight, like, you have to do research on a monster, you have to sit down and brew potions and ready for it. It really feels like you're going to war, and I like that. I like that sort of pre-planning and stuff. It's why I don't like beating JRPG bosses on, like, the first try. I like to lose and then be like, okay, well, this boss uses lightning. Do I have something that gives me lightning resistance in my inventory? Should I wear armor that increases my speed so I can get more turns? Like, I love that sort of planning, I guess. Not to say I'm good at it, but... Other M. I mean... Yeah, I got it. It's absolutely terrible. I'm like, can I find redeeming stuff in here? And there's some redeeming things, I think, in Other M. There's some ideas that could be salvaged, but like, the writing for Samus, the writing in general, the meme of you having to get permission from Adam before you can use any of your upgrades, the way the healing works, the way combat works, like, there's just so much there that's like, any bit of enjoyment you can get out of it is absolutely dampened by everything else. It was an interesting experience because of getting to play a game that people so vehemently hated. And I think I remember mentioning when I played it and I was at the end, I was like, it was an experience. Like, I didn't love it, but I'm happy that I got to have that experience, I suppose. Like, that was the cool part for me, getting to experience this thing, you know, that people had talked about so much. And I think there is some enjoyment and merit in that. You know, it's kind of like playing bad video games in general. It's like, you can get some enjoyment out of them. But at the end of the day, if I look at Other M, I can't see anything but just weirdness and like messing with the timeline, and just so much about Other M I think is just messed up, and that's what moves it in absolutely terrible. I don't think Other M can be described as having major problems. I think it's like, oh god, it's more like, major problems to me is like, a good portion of the game is screwed up. Like, 60% of the game is playable, 40% of it is just an absolute mess. And I don't think that's the case for Other M. I think it's more like, you can get a little bit of enjoyment and there's some good bits in it. Like 10-20%. The rest of it is a trash fire. So it's not like completely irredeemable garbage. I still think there is value and merit in playing it and experiencing it, even though a lot of people would hate it. But it's you know, it's not a fun time. I can confidently say, like, while I enjoyed my time with it, it's also, I think, one of the games where I got the least amount of upgrades just because I could not be bothered to go back and re-explore and interact with the mechanics and stuff. Which part of that probably was me not playing it on, you know, hardware. But, you know, it's also like, meh. I think there's also something to be said about creating a game that is basically re-releasable / remastered. Not that it is, but I don't think Nintendo's gonna go through the trouble of doing that, just because, like, you made the mechanics so weird that it's kind of impossible to keep it going in the future, you know? And there's also something to be said about just playing something the way it was originally made, because if you don't, then you're losing a bit of this, you know, there's an argument to be made there as well, but it would be nice if some Nintendo games weren't, like, so weird and untranslatable to new consoles that they just can't be released there. So, you know, there's a whole conversation around that. I don't particularly feel qualified to have it because I'm not smart, but... okay, so... Federation Force. Never played it. Don't know if I ever will. I distinctly remember this game being announced and my friend that was really into Metroid at the time nearly throwing up. Okay, Samus Returns. Haven't played it, as mentioned, because Samus Returns is, you know, Metroid 2, and it's Nintendo's stab at it. I played AM2R instead. Ooh, okay, now we're getting to the interesting ones. Let's do AM2R first. I think AM2R is great, and I don't think I put it above Super Metroid. I do think I put it above Zero Mission. I do think I put it above Zero Mission. It is interesting, because AM2R really sticks out to me, and I guess, you know, Metroid 2 and Samus Returns by what's the word? By, like, you know, as well as basically a consequence, a cause and effect thing. They all... The interesting thing to me about Metroid 2 is the story, because you are effectively just going somewhere and wiping out an alien species. And that's particularly, you know, interesting with Super Metroid into the mix too, and everything. But it's like, you are... You know, it's such a big event, Metroid 2, in the timeline, you know? It is the death of the Metroids, the extinction of the Metroids. which causes massive issues. So it's such a climactic point in the story, and it's also cool if you have the context of everything else that goes on in the story, because as you're going through the game, you're murdering these Metroids, and if somebody that didn't know what was going on saw this, they would be like, oh yeah, they're crazy monsters and they want to kill me, and that's like, you know, that's cool and everything, I'm fighting monsters, yay, and you don't think about it too much. But for those initiated, it is like a sort of melancholic adventure. It's like, all the other games, I mean, melancholy isolation is kind of a big thing with the Metroid series in general, I feel, but the melancholic feeling of you going around in that game, and your objective is just kill Metroids, and you know you're doing something horrible, it's an interesting experience, because it's like, you know, when you're fighting Ridley or something, you're like, yeah, screw you, Ridley, you suck, I hate you. And when you're doing other things, it's like, you know, defeating Mother Brain and the Space Pirates, it's like, oh yeah, not to say that the Space Pirates are like inherently evil or anything like that, or that they deserve it, but it just feels really sad. I guess that's the thing too, you're not actually doing an extinction on the Space Pirates. You're not totally wiping them out. But the fact that the Metroids, it's like, wow, you were really just taking this piece of life out of the world, basically. Like, that is a very deeply melancholic experience, I feel, and it kind of fits the vibe of that game in general, so it makes for a really neat experience. So I actually think I have to put it above Super Metroid for me, just because, like, I don't know, there's something about the experience of AM2R, and like I said, I haven't played Metroid 2 or Samus Returns, but people talk so highly of AM2R, I still feel like AM2R is the best experience for that. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it's just such a strong thing to me. I'm also imagining at some point I'm going to get something mixed up or get something wrong on this list as well. So I'm gonna feel like I have something here that I haven't played, or I have something here that, like, you know, I'm getting wrong. But here's hoping not. It's also funny to have Metroid on here because, like, yeah, I have played Metroid. I didn't get very far in it, though. But these I have just not touched, which is my main thing. It's something that I didn't touch. I don't technically have to complete these, but these are just something I haven't touched. Okay, some of the most interesting ones here. I also don't know how long we've been recording. I've been yapping for a minute, sorry. Beyond... I think we gotta do Dread first, because Beyond is the one we most recently played. Let's do Dread first. Dread. Actually, my first Metroid on the channel. God, I think back to that and how bright-eyed and bushy-tailed I was. Like, I think to that playthrough, and that was also when my wedding was going on. And, like, I got stuck while recording stuff for, like, my wedding and my honeymoon. And I was stuck because I didn't understand shine sparking. Like, I got Speed Booster, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And it had a little tutorial or explanation of shine sparking. I just didn't understand that because I had never done a shine spark before. So I remember getting that upgrade and not even realizing that was something I could do with it. So I was running around the map trying to figure out what to do, and the solution was, yeah, you have to shine spark places. So it was kind of my first instance of interacting with shine sparks, which, you know, I would continue on to have a love-or-hate relationship with, but I still think it's like one of the most iconic Metroid abilities, along with, like, Screw Attack. Shine Sparking is just super cool. I suck at Shine Spark puzzles and Speed Booster puzzles. Like, I'm terrible at them, and Dread has some pretty nasty ones. Dread also had, like, a Shine Spark you could do with the Morph Ball, right? I think I'm remembering that right. I should really replay Dread now. I've considered doing that on stream, like, just doing another playthrough. Also, Dread has, quite possibly, in my opinion, the coolest suit, up there with Fusion. The Emmy were a really fun idea. I like the idea of having, like, an ever-present nemesis. I guess you can kind of say some of my favorite Metroid games do have, like, a nemesis that you are being chased by, or some sort of crazy threat that you're being chased by that you're encouraged not to fight, because I think that's really cool and lends itself well to the whole isolation atmosphere of Metroid. So I think that's really cool. I think it's got to go up here. I think it must go up here. I really had a good time with Dread, and you may say that's because like that's the first Metroid game I've ever finished. But it was just really cool. It also had a parry. You had... I should really put a warning at the beginning of this video saying I will be getting into story stuff, so if you don't want to be spoiled on stuff, be careful. It had, like, the Chozo stuff. It had more stuff about Samus's past. It had Ravenbeak, of course. That's, like, a top-tier boss fight for me. Does it eke out Fusion for me, though? I really like Fusion. I can't even explain to you why I love Fusion so much, but I just think it's such a cool game. It's really hard to put one of these above each other. It's really, really hard to put one of these above each other. For me. Like, for me, Dread and Fusion are just the peak of Metroid for me. I really think so. Like, they're the absolute peak. And like, you know, if I moved these down to great games, like these two would be the ones up here. That's the thing. I think it basically, because of what I just said, I think these have to move. I think they are great games. I think these are great games. I like, this is so close to being peak fiction. But whether it's because it's been a while since I've played Echoes, or it just didn't particularly stick out to me as much as these two, it just barely doesn't make it in the peak fiction, I think. I know I'm second guessing myself and changing my answers, but like, this is kind of a wide tier, I think, because Zero Mission is a great game in my opinion. Like, it's pretty good. There's a big gap between Zero Mission and Super Metroid, and then there's a big gap between Super Metroid and AM2R. And then once again, there's big gaps here. I in fact think I would put AM2R above Prime. Like I said, I don't know what it is about it. I just really liked it. But Prime also has, in my opinion, probably the best music in the series, which is a big thing for me as well. But we're getting distracted. Don't get distracted. Yeah, so that's been moved around. I think I legitimately don't know if I can put either of these above the other. Dread, barely. Just barely, because Dread is new, has cool points for having parries and just like cool boss fights and stuff like that. So I think Dread barely ekes out Fusion for me. Just barely. Both of them are absolutely phenomenal. I love them. They're definitely my favorite Metroids. Beyond. Okay, we're here. We're here at last. The one that I've just finished, and the one that I did all of these to prep for. Where do you go? Where does Beyond go? I think Beyond goes in flawed but enjoyable. Obviously it's going to go... I think Metroid should be behind Hunters. I am just reordering these things a little bit, don't mind me. I didn't really put anything in the major problems tier. But Prime for... Do I put it behind Corruption? See, now this is... We're once again going to ramble here a little bit, because... both of these have flaws. The question is, which one is the more serious flaw to me? Because Metroid Corruption has the issue of it takes a little bit of the fun out of the combat, and it also relies a little bit less on exploration. Like, not a ton, but it isn't as my headset just turned off. I was like, what was that noise? It isn't as now I lost my train of thought. It isn't as like exploration heavy and discovering cool new worlds as much as like 2 and Prime are. Like, I really can't overstate how fantastic Prime and Echoes are for that. And like, I'm still looking at this and I'm like, oh my god, I put them in great games, and this is my problem with tier list, is because like, I do feel so strongly about these. I'm just like, when I think of peak Metroid to me, it's Fusion and Dread. It always is, which is funny, because I've mentioned before that like, I might like the 3D ones more than I like the 2D ones, but just because like, I can do more of the puzzles and stuff and I can collect everything. But there's just something so cool about these two. Like, both of them almost have a sort of survival horror feel to them, and I kind of love that. It's like the peak of the isolated feeling in Metroid. Whereas like, in Prime, all of them, I don't feel as much like a survival horror feel from it. Not to say they are, like Dread and Fusion are survival horror, but they just nail like, these are the only 2 games where I feel like I was actually scared at any point. And I never thought I would feel that in a Metroid game. But they're cool. Their atmosphere and everything is just amazing. But we were talking about these and I'm getting distracted because my brain sucks. So yeah, Corruption kind of takes out a little bit of the combat fun for me and a little bit of the exploration. On the flip side, Beyond has better combat, and the exploration is a little bit closer to like Prime 1 and 2, but I still don't think it's as good as those for sure. But the question then becomes, what do I prefer between Beyond and Corruption? And I think it's gotta be Beyond. I think it has to be Beyond, because Beyond did return me a little bit to that feeling of looking in my bag of tricks, even though it was just like lighting fire and, you know, like that, and being like, okay, how should I take down this boss? It did also have like the little side shot, which was cool, even though it wasn't utilized as much in boss fights, aside from that one. I think it goes above Corruption for me. I do think it goes above Corruption for me. I don't think either of them particularly nailed the having a party/group of friends angle, or allies or co-workers. I don't know what you call it, but I don't think either of them really nailed that. And I don't think we've had a Metroid game nail that yet, quite frankly. But I appreciate the idea, and I could see it potentially being something cool at some point. I do think Beyond goes above Corruption, just because the combat's more enjoyable in Beyond. I will say the reason Beyond goes in flawed but enjoyable is because it is like, it's such a disappointing game. Not as like it's awful, terrible, irredeemable, anything like that. It's disappointing because you can see so much of the potential that was there, and they just couldn't get it done in time. And it does feel unfinished in some parts, because quite frankly it is. And that's a bummer, because you can see the potential. You can see how cool it would have been to have a more diverse open world where you're traversing on like a vehicle, and there's, you know, cool stuff there, and it's filled in with things to do, and there's cool creatures running around and everything. But like, Beyond's open world, as small as it is just so simple and lackluster. It feels like the open world in Beyond feels like what you would get if there was that kind of game released on Steam in early access. It's like, all the reviews would say, oh yeah, the game is pretty promising in its current state, still needs work though. Like, they need to fill in the world with stuff, and that's what Beyond's open world feels like to me. So it's like, in that case, yeah, it's a bummer. And like I said, I don't think the squad stuff hit as highly as it could. I do think the tutorials were a little overbearing at the end. There's also the sin of collecting the green energy, forcing you to interact with their unfinished overworld. They could have just not had that, or lessen the amount you need by a pretty significant margin, and it wouldn't have been as egregious. But I didn't like that part about it. But as far as the exploration, or the exploration of worlds and stuff goes, I do think it was better than Corruption. My only other main issue with Beyond is something that I've kind of thought about as I'm finished with it now and everything. It's difficult to explain, but in Prime, it really feels like you're walking through like a living, breathing world. Like, things wrap on around themselves, and there's areas where certain creatures inhabit, and then like there's all of that. Something I noticed with Beyond, especially when I was re-exploring the areas, is some of them are just so linear. Like, I would even venture to say most of them are so linear. Like, Vault Forge is literally just a circle with floors. So you have to like go through elevators and stuff, and there's a lot of traversal with that. So it's kind of just a pain in the ass to traverse. And it's like, once you return there at the end, it's as simple as, oh, you need an item on the bottom floor, so you gotta take the elevator, and then like... And it's just not fun as like, I'm thinking of like Prime 1's world, where it's like, oh yeah, you're walking through this big room, and then that connects to all these side rooms, and some of the side rooms connect to each other, and then there's alternate morph ball pathways you can take to get from this end to this end, and it's like, it feels more like you're charting a planet, rather where some of the areas and Beyond just feel like it's, people have said this before about like Final Fantasy 13 and stuff, it feels like a hallway at times. It does make me think about like some of the JRPGs that I have played, where it's like the dungeon layout is so boring because it's just a hallway. Like, I'm looking at Tales of Vesperia, or not Vesperia, Berseria, Tales of Zestria, which I didn't admittedly play much, but it has the same issue where it's like, Prime Beyond obviously isn't this bad, but the cardinal sin that a lot of those games do is they throw you in a dungeon, and it's like, oh yeah, the dungeon's a straight line, there's one fork in the road, and you can go down there, and there's a chest, and it has a piece of armor and a switch, and you need to hit that switch because it opens the door at the end of the hallway. And that's like as crazy as it gets. Obviously Beyond is not that, but I still think Beyond kind of has an issue with just exploring and revisiting some of those areas isn't as fun as it was in like Prime 1 and 2. And I do think a big part of that is just because of how vertical a lot of the zones were. It is kind of like a vertical hallway. I think the worst instance of this is the mines, because the mines was a difficult one for them to figure out revisiting, I believe, because it's kind of like, you're there for stories, so they have to kind of give it to you in a linear fashion so the story can happen. But that's incredibly boring to traverse after the fact, because you're just retreading the ground you took during the story, except all of the interesting stuff in the story isn't happening anymore. So it's, I don't love that. I think the best areas in Beyond, in my opinion, were the ice area. That one was pretty cool and alleviated some of the concerns that I have, and I do like the whole, you're exploring a lab, there's things frozen, you're just waiting for stuff to pop off kind of deal. I do think that's cool. So that one's strong. Fury Green was pretty cool as well. Not as quite as high as the ice area, I think, but it felt more like a Prime area. Whereas Vault Forge, Flare Pool, and the mines were kind of a letdown just because of like the way they were laid out, I think. And this is not completely damning by any means. It's just this like, it left me a little disappointed. Having one area like that would be fine. Having 3 areas like that is like, I'm not as into this. I would have liked a cool open naturey area like Fury Green or the ice area. But yeah, that's that. Also, the story of Beyond, I do feel like is kind of a retread of a lot of the things that we've experienced in the other games. Like, I realize they're probably running out of ideas for like what Samus can do and everything, but that was a bit of a bummer, I think. I do think that was a little bit of a bummer. One other thing I wanted to do really quickly now that we've done this is take a look at the timeline and see specifically like where Beyond is placed, because somebody in my Discord said it's actually placed after Super Metroid, and if that's the case, that is crazy to me. Like, that's nuts. But I'm gonna look at like an updated timeline and just see what that looks like really quickly now that we finished our tier list. But that's what it's looking like for me. I think this is a good list. This is my list. It is probably different from many people's, but you know, I rambled for way too long and hopefully got my thoughts out in a coherent way. But we'll see. But let's look at timeline stuff. Okay, so yeah, I looked at it and I can't find like just off a cursory search like some like established sources, but I'm guessing like actually explain why Prime 4 takes place after Super Metroid. But I'm guessing Nintendo confirmed it or something. So that is interesting because yeah, the things I've looked at place Prime after Other M, which is also after Super Metroid, which is weird. I guess it would make sense why Sylix is the leader of the Space Pirates after Super Metroid, because Mother Brain is dead. So there's that. I mean, they need a new leader, but also the Metroids are supposed to be dead, and they say Sylix was using Metroids to control the Space Pirates. And also, there were things fused with Metroids at the beginning of Dread, which... Or Dread, Beyond. I think I was saying Dread this whole time, and I'm sorry if I was. Yeah, they did the whole fusing Metroids to things and Beyond. And that's weird. Because the Metroids are supposed to be gone. Right? Like, they're supposed to be done. So it's weird that even came up, and I'm realizing also in Beyond it never really came up again past a few times. Like, there was one or two creatures that we ran into that was like, oh, it's gone crazy because it's been fused with a Metroid, which was, I guess, Sylix controlling them, like we learned, but like, that wasn't really used anymore after that, which is kind of a bummer, but also, it's just, like, weird timeline-wise. Like, it feels to me like they locked on to, oh, Mother Brain's dead, we need a new Space Pirate leader, let's make Sylix the new Space Pirate leader. And they ran with that idea, and then didn't think about it as much after that, because it being placed after Super Metroid just makes no sense. Unless, like... I mean, there's the stuff in Other M, but I don't even know if that's like canon at this point. I mean, I guess it is because it's mentioned in Dread a little bit, the Adam and Samus stuff. But like, the only way I can even think of that happening is like, yes, the Metroids were wiped out, but the Space Pirates had like some of their Metroid stuff left over still, and were able to create more Metroids, or copy them, or use their DNA in some way to influence things, which that might be explained a little bit in Beyond, and I'm just not remembering it right now. But it is so weird to have it placed after Super Metroid. That is so odd. It's also like, the whole thing so far with like the Prime series for me, in my head, how I always made it make sense was Prime is early adventures. Most of the 2D games are later adventures, and that's how it made sense in my brain. And you also, you know, it's like there's the Metroid era and there's the X-Parasite era. So now with Beyond being thrown into the mix, it's like all the Metroid games are, all the Prime games are early, and then it has a little asterisk that says except Beyond, which is weird. It's very weird. It's very, very odd. It is placed oddly, and I'm not going to say it's like totally going to destroy the timeline, but it definitely upset it a little bit and makes some things make less sense, I feel. Obviously, I'm not particularly qualified on this or anything. These are kind of just the rambling thoughts of someone that has casually interacted with this series, but it's like, that feels very odd. Like, a lot of the story and Beyond in general feels very odd. Because it's like, as I've mentioned before, the whole thing with, oh my god, I can't think of their name right now. The race in Beyond. Oh my god, I don't know why the name is escaping me right now. I definitely know it, obviously, but for some reason I can't think of the name right now. But, our little axolotl friends. I want to say their name starts with an L, but I think I'm just thinking of who I'm going to compare them to, which is the Luminoth. It does feel very close to the whole thing with the Luminoth. It's like, this crazy thing is happening here, and we're fighting a war against these other creatures. How are we going to deal with it? And you go there, and there's some that have, like, successfully preserved themselves or left a message for their savior, and Samus is the savior, and blah blah blah. So it feels like a retread of that. The only real difference is, like, the Ing were actually just, like, you know, against the Luminoth, and they were effectively competing. Whereas we get to the Grievers, and it's like, oh, the twist is that no, the Lemorn, that's the name. The Lemorn did this to themselves, unintentionally, but they did this to themselves. So like that's the main like twist there. But the story of that does feel really similar, and like I guess a lot of the Prime games are Samus shows up to a planet, she needs to help save it, to help the people that live there and stuff, and that's, you know, that's in a lot of them. So it's like, yeah, I get that, but that Beyond story does feel like it's a little bit of a retread of some of the other stuff we've seen before, and I think that's why Dread and Fusion rank so highly for me. I don't know how many times I've probably said Dread instead of Beyond and vice versa, but I think that's the reason Dread and Fusion are so high for me, because they do feel like, not only are they like scary experiences, which really draws you in and immerses you, I feel like those two and AM2R and Metroid Prime 2 probably have the most interesting stories for me, because they're all really isolating and melancholic in some way, you know? And I think that's important to the Metroid experience, that you kind of feel like that, and it uses the gameplay and story and everything to really put you into that spot. So I think that's why the ones that I have ranked the highest are there. Whereas, like, you know, Prime and a few of the other ones is more like a hero kind of story and stuff, so... And you do feel very, very powerful in those games. There's not often times where you feel like weak or out of your element, but I would say in Dread and Fusion, that's like the big thing. You feel weak and ill-prepared for the threat that's in front of you a lot in both of those games, especially Fusion. So, yeah, this has been a rambly long video. I expected this to be like 10 or 20 minutes. But it turned out to not be that, so I've got to edit this and get it up now. But thanks for humoring my dumb idea. If people like these kinds of things, I can maybe do like these kinds of tier lists and stuff more, or just like kind of videos where I talk about something or a topic. I don't know if people are interested in my thoughts on anything. I don't particularly think I have crazy interesting ones, but maybe. And I do like to yap. So I could do videos like if people wanted more things like this, I thought about doing like, you know, a tier list of all of my LPs, which would take a fucking millennia. A tier list of like all of the indie, specifically Metroidvanias that I've played on the channel. Like, you know, what are my favorite Metroidvanias that I've played on the channel? What are my favorite RPGs that I've played on the channel? Just a bunch of stuff like that, you know? It could be fun to get some of those thoughts out, and I've thought about doing similar things on the Patreon, like Q&A stuff and those kinds of things, because especially since I don't interact with comments as much anymore, some people might be interested in my opinions on some things that I just don't get out in videos. So, but yeah, Hope you enjoyed this rambly little video, basically a weird podcast from me, but hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for something else.